So good afternoon to all of our members of our Universal Philosophical Community, the White Tower. Today's guest is an assistant professor in the Department of Philosophy at Zakir Hussain College, University of Delhi, Dr. Vandana Sharma. Vandana Sharma, we're very glad to have you here with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Would you like to say a few things about your academic career?
Yes, so I'm Dr. Vandana Sharma Diya. That's a name given to me by my guru, and I am presently an assistant professor at the Zakir Hussain College, University of Delhi, in the Department of Philosophy, and I'm also the advisory member of the Film Censor Board of India. And besides that, I am a researcher at the Indian Institute of Advanced Study, which is under President Murmu, the President of India, Honorable President of India. And that's a little bit about me. I've written a lot of research papers, a lot of books. One of my books has been published by the University of Cambridge. And today I'm here with all of you to talk about yoga.
Very nice. And you have authored 5 books, actually, including Environmental Consciousness in the 9 Schools of Indian Philosophy, your work of Shankara Vedanta for Environmental Harmony, and another book which is called Nature's Wisdom, Indian Philosophical Insights. All of them are highly appreciated books.
Thank you.
And you're here today with us to talk about yoga and its history. As a first question, we'd like to ask you, what are the origins of yoga? And in particular, what was the driving force that led people in practicing yoga techniques in the first place? Was it to reverse engineer their past and erase all the misfortunes they faced, starting all over again? Was it to offer an alternative way of worship to a hopeless society? Or because of this inner human desire of going beyond death and diseases of the past?
Well, yoga is not an exercise. It is not a stream of study. This is not how yoga developed. If we look at the historic past of yoga, we find the roots in the Vedas. Vedas are the highest scriptures of Sanatan Dharma, which you casually refer to as Hindu or Hinduism. While ism is a very negative word, it means, a thought process which is very bound. And therefore, Hinduism is not a very appropriate word to be used, just as there is no word like Christianism or Islamism. Learned people do not use Hinduism. And so we find the roots of the way of yoga in Vedas. Now, yoga is a way of life. It is not a religion. It is not a practice. It is not a thought. It is not a philosophy. It is a way of life. This has to be understood. Now, what does the word yoga means? Now, the word yoga, which is people mispronounce it as yoga. It is not yoga. It is yoga. So without a sound. And yoga word comes from the Sanskrit root yuj, which means to join. So there are 3 basic meanings of yoga. One is yujir yoge, which means to join. Joining of what? Joining of yourself with yourself. Joining of yourself with your body. Joining of yourself with your mind. Joining of yourself with your family. Joining of yourself with your with all those sentient beings that are living in the society, joining of yourself with the society, joining of the self with environment, joining of the self with the cosmos, and at large, joining of the self with the supreme. Therefore, Yujir Yoge or Yujya means joining of Jiva with Shiva, Nara with Narayan, and the individual soul with the cosmic self. That is the first meaning of Yujya or Yoga. Second is Yujya Samatvam, which means Yoga is balance. It is Samta, it is balance. It is a state of balance. Balance is not to be understood as physical balance. Balance means balance within. Balance means balance in your health. Balance means balance in your thought process. Balance means balance in your entire being. Balance means balance in the cosmos. And last but not the least, it means Yujir Samadho, Yujya Samadho, which means yoga is a state of highest samadhi. Samadhi is not meditation, but the nearest English word which I can use for samadhi is meditation alone. And therefore, it is the highest form of meditation. It is a place where, dualities end. There is no difference between you and the other. It is a state where you see the self in all beings and all beings in the self. And by realization of non-dualism at that moment, you are rooted in peace, in calm, in harmony. So these are the three meanings of yoga. And therefore, yoga is not a religion. It is not a philosophy that is to be followed. However, over a period of time, it has developed into a philosophy. It has developed into a practice. But in the Vedas, it was a way of life. It was not something which was meant for a certain group of people, maybe males or women. No, it was meant for everybody. The entire cosmos comes under the umbrella of yoga.
It's very encouraging. And so there seems to be an element of oneness, actually unifying the self in his attempt to follow divinity. It's clear cut, a way of life. Now, going back to the past, to
Now,
yoga.
let me also tell you, a lot of
Yes, of course.
think, oh, she's talking about non-dualism.
Mhm.
Well, yoga, what we study in universities today, is a dualistic philosophy having Purusha and Prakriti. But
Yes.
that is not the only type of yoga. We have yoga as spoken about by Jagadguru Adi Shankaracharya, who has been a proponent of the Advaita philosophy. And in his book called Aproksha Anubhuti, he speaks about non-dualistic yoga. So there are various paths of yogas. It is not just that yoga is a dualistic philosophy. Yes, that is also there. But then one way of looking at it is also non-dualistic way of understanding this.
Yeah, so we've searched about it, and there seems to be a classification based either on mind and body, based on a way of spiritual life, based on a way of other things like breathing, blending, and lots of kinds of yogas, yogs.
Well, let me tell you about this, that, the original yoga, mentioned in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Patanjali was a great rishi. And
the sage Patanjali,
yes,
who
absolutely.
introduced.
Saint Patanjali, yes. And he had written Patanjali Yoga Sutras. He had compiled the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, and he does not mention any asanas. Asana means, various poses.
Yes.
So, like you have the Tadasana, or
postures.
you have, holding your hands at the back, etc., etc. So these poses were not mentioned in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Their yoga meant, skill in the work that you do, as mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita also. So it was
Yes.
yoga karma tu kaushalam, which means Yoga means skill in action. Yoga means, connecting with yourself. Yoga means connecting with the cosmos. That was the meaning of yoga, how to lead a life. And therefore, he gave 8 parts of ahimsa, satya, astay, aparigrah, brahmacharya, brahmacharya, aparigrah, and then, ahimsa, satya, astay, then you had brahmacharya, aparigrah, pranayam, samadhi, and dharana, dhyan, and samadhi. So these were the 8 parts of yoga which you used to follow to lead a moral, ethical life. But later on, when the Gorakhnath tradition came in, the Gorakhnath sect said that no, yoga, before you go inside, it is important to cure the outer part, because this body is the instrument through which you're going to realize that supreme. And therefore, they brought in Chausatha Yogini, which means they brought in various yoga poses through which you could keep your body healthy. And if your body was healthy, then that became a healthy instrument through which you could realize the internal states.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes. Great explanation, and thank you very much for that. Now, going back to the past, talking about the theory of yoga, we pretty much know, based on what you've just said, that it is atheist in nature. We also know that priests in the past were opposed to yoga, as if they wanted very much to infuse some religious elements into yoga practices. But the yogists were opposed to that. We also know that religion in the past was a vehicle of war. In the name of religion, a lot of mass murders occurred. In a sense, is it that religion was seen as an obstacle to yoga, and because of that, yoga disengaged itself from any kind of religious doctrines and sought an individual path to spirituality?
Well, in Bharat or in India or in the Vedas, religion is not the way people understand religion in Abrahamic religions. There is no word, you cannot use the word religion for dharma, because dharma is cosmic order. Dharma is righteousness. Dharma is duty. Dharma is responsibility. So there is no book or there is no text, religious text, that says that, if an animal is injured, if your mother has a headache, you have to take her to the hospital. But it is the duty, it is the dharma of a son, of a human being, to take his mother or to take an animal to the hospital if the other is in need. Now, religion is very different from dharma. Now, when you talk about whether, they both were interfering, no. Because when you see the 9 schools of Indian philosophy, starting with Charvak, Jainism, Buddhism, Nyaya, Vaisesik, Sankhya, Yoga, Mimamsa, and Vedanta, half of the philosophies do not believe in the concept of God. So, here God is not in the center. Here, people believe in cosmic order. So, if you are sleeping at the right time, you are dharmic. Or in your, casual terms, I can say you are religious. If you are getting up at the right time, you are dharmic. If you are not breaking the cycles of your body, you are dharmic. If you are not eating wrong, you are dharmic. If you are not harming anyone, you are dharmic. If you are not telling lies, you are dharmic. And for that, you don't need any superior force. You are good for yourself, not because of the fear of any God sitting above. So here the concept of God is also very different. God is not somebody who's sitting in the heavens. God is in every speck of the cosmos. In the Vedas, The
Yeah.
first word of the Rig Veda, it says, the first verse says, Eko aham bahusyamaha. I am one and I shall become many. And therefore, the many things that you see in the cosmos are nothing but that supreme. That supreme manifests as everything. And therefore, divinity is not something separate in some other place which has to come down because of doing yoga. No. Divinity is already within you. You just need
Everywhere.
to realize it. That's all. So
Yeah.
yoga is that methodology through which you realize that divinity. It is a method, it is a way of researching, realizing. So yes,
Yeah.
there was so understanding of dharma as religion is not the correct understanding of dharma. Dharma has a broader understanding which connotes to cosmic order, which connotes to the nature of any being. For example, fire burns, that is the dharma of fire. Water flows downwards, that is the dharma of water. So fire cannot exist without burning, and therefore a man cannot exist if he does not have humanity in him.
Very, very interesting perspective.
Yes.
Um, it requires a leap of spirituality, as it seems, to attain divinity. And it is also based on experiences, which are essential to develop faith for the divine. And we know pretty much that this doctrine of Dharma is like come and see, seeing is believing.
No, not really.
Not really.
Dharma is existent. It is
Mhm.
Sat. I mean, you don't have to see to believe that fire burns. It is anyways there.
Mhm.
You are existing. You don't need your eyes to believe that you are existing. It is something which is already, which you realize. So dharma is something which is there. It is Sat. It is truth. It is existent, and nothing can change that. And all
Mhm.
you need to do is you need to realize this. The moment we realize that all other beings in the cosmos are playing their roles, are following their dharma, are following their dharma, you will not interfere in their being, and you will not destroy their being.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
realization is dharma.
Yeah.
Moment I realize that, purity and flow is the nature of water, this is how water nurtures the cosmos. The moment I realize this, I will not harm the water bodies. The moment I realize the nature of a bird, I will not harm the bird. I will understand that, the bird, no matter how small it is, but it has come to this world to play a certain role in the cosmos.
Right.
I will appreciate that role. Realization of
Yeah.
dharma makes you balanced. Realization of dharma makes you compassionate. Realization of dharma makes you harmonious. Now you flow with the harmony of the cosmos.
Right. So seeing in the sense of realization of actual inner
Yes.
understanding.
Inner
Yeah.
seeing, inner
Yeah.
seeing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
That's it. Um, Great. So now, if we go also back to the Indus Valley civilization or the Harappan civilization, which was actually the source of Sankhya philosophy, consisting of both Prakriti and Purusha, dealing with how to disentangle the conscious entity from nature by meditating on the elements of nature. So it seems as if yoga is not alone, is also attached to an older Sankhya philosophy. Would you like to a bit elaborate on this relation between Sankhya and yoga?
Yes, so when you talk about the Indus Valley civilization, Sir John Marshall has done a lot of research on this. But and yes, we get saksha, we get evidences that in the Indus Valley civilization there was worship of Shiva and Shakti, or Purush and Prakriti. Purush is pure consciousness and Prakriti is matter. So, according to the Sankhya or the Yoga philosophy, so now Yoga and Sankhya, they are not separate. Yoga is the practical aspect of it, and Sankhya is the theoretical aspect of it. So, according to the Yoga and Sankhya philosophy, the entire cosmos is a combination or coming together of Purush and Prakriti. Purush is pure. It
Pure
has no
consciousness.
variations. It has no ups and downs. All the ups and downs are there in Prakriti. Because Prakriti is Trigunatmak. It has three qualities: Tamas, Rajas, and Sattva. I don't know how to translate this. Sattva is pure.
Like
Rajas
the
is
three colors,
ether.
like the three colors, white,
Correct,
red, and
correct.
black.
Correct. So black, white, and gray. So you can actually say that, but actually that is not the right way of explaining it. The right way I can only explain in Sanskrit or Hindi, which will not be understandable here. But the closest is that you can say that yes, black, white, and gray. So Prakriti is Trigunatmak, and all these three shades are there in every creature of the cosmos. And therefore, by coming together of Purush and Prakriti, the entire cosmos comes into its form, comes into, manifests into, whatever you see with the eye. So, this is, the entire thing. So, there is no, difference between Sankhya and Yoga. Yes, one of the main difference between Sankhya and Yoga is that Sankhya does not believe in God. Sankhya does not believe in the concept of God. Therefore, Sankhya is also known by the name Nirishwar Sankhya. Sankhya which does not believe in God. The meaning of Nirishwar Sankhya is that Sankhya which does not believe in God. And Yoga is that philosophy which believes in Ishwar or God. And therefore, the other name of Yoga is Sa Ishwar Sankhya, which means Sankhya that believes in God. So Yoga and Sankhya have been divided into Saishwar Sankhya and Nirishwar Sankhya, which believe in God and does not believe in God.
Hmm.
So yes, because ultimately, when you
Subdivision.
think about whether the hen came first or the egg came first, you will go into infinite regression,
Yeah.
infinite regression. Which came first? Did the hen came
Yeah, you never
first?
know.
The egg came first. So in order
Yeah.
to end that, it is important to accept the supremacy of one God.
Yeah. Um, very nice explanation. Um, just a bit of clarification. Did women who were buried along with all their
I
paraphernalia,
didn't get you. Could you repeat your
yeah,
question?
uh, um, about the status of women, I mean, which was really good at the time, did they play a role in this development of Sankhya philosophy?
Absolutely. As I said, Sankhya is not something which is separate. All these nine philosophies that I've spoken about, Jainism and Buddhism and
Hmm.
Charvak does not believe in God, does not believe in soul, does not believe in rebirth. Okay, so it is a complete materialistic philosophy. Two Nyaya, Vaisesik, Sankhya, Yoga, Mimamsa, and Vedanta, they are like different parts of the body, just as you have hands and eyes and nose, but they are a part of one body. Similarly, all these nine philosophies together make the Indian philosophy, and without any one of them, Indian philosophy will cease to be. And
Hmm.
all the roots of these philosophies are found in the Vedas. In fact, even Buddha and Mahavir, they were born in a Vedic family. They had studied the Vedas, they had studied the Upanishads. Later on, they refused to agree with the Vedas, but
Hmm.
their core or their roots are found in the Vedas only. So I actually missed your question. What
Yeah,
question?
about the women's role in the
Yes,
develop.
about the women. Correct.
Yeah.
So you know scholars have been mentioned in the Vedas. We had scholars like Gargi, Maitri, Lopamudra. We had Ube Bharti, who literally defeated Shankaracharya. So we had huge scholars. Women were scholars at that times, at that time, and therefore you cannot become a scholar in India unless, in the Vedic times I'm talking about, until and unless you have submitted yourself to yoga. Therefore, it is understood by implication that those women could not have become scholars unless they had submitted themselves to yoga. And
Great.
therefore, yoga
Great.
does, the
This
Vedas
explains
clearly
everything.
say,
Yes.
the Vedas clearly say that wisdom is beyond gender. You know,
Hmm.
this
Right.
wisdom is available for everybody, even
Right.
for eunuchs. So eunuchs
Right.
are revered in the Vedas. Eunuchs, who are neither men nor women,
Yes.
even they are revered in the Vedas. And we had scholars who were eunuchs. We had uh, we had philosophers and dancers who were eunuchs.
Great. That explains everything. Um, really nice. Now, um, still in the past, and in the gradual formation of the first premature democratic states within the Indian territory, we know some things about the society back then. The people living there were peace-loving people, were on the defensive rather than on the offensive, didn't care much about counter-attacking the invaders from the northern territories, from the northern borders, but they were mostly focused on cleanliness of the body, and they were pretty good at organizing their inner cities, having a prestigious drainage system, which was connected to the main system outside of their fortification. They were good builders, really good architects. Um, so and the political regime of the time. A few things about it. There were no kings or queens back then, but the whole state affairs were administered by a group of people actually, and who were seeking their peace and quiet, let's say. And so, having these elements into consideration, what role did yoga play in the formation of these premature democratic states?
Well, as I told you, yoga for the world is a subject. In India, it is not, a subject. It is a way of life. For example, right now you are speaking to me. This is yoga, wherein you
Right,
are not concentrating anywhere else.
right.
So, doing your work with perfection is yoga. Therefore, whether you are an artist, whether you are a dancer, whether you are a philosopher, whether you are a mother, whether you are a father, if you're doing your work, if you're doing your karma, with concentration, samatva yoga uchyate, with samta, with balance, with mindfulness, you're a yogi.
Mhm.
You don't really have to do any huge asanas, standing on one leg, or bending backwards to be a yogi. No.
No.
If you're a teacher and you are teaching well, with concentration, with honesty, with mindfulness, you're a yogi. If you're a mother, you're taking care of your child, breastfeeding her with concentration, you're a yogi. If you are eating with concentration, you're a yogi, right? So being mindful is being a yogi. So yoga does not mean, so, when you say that what role did yoga play, what you are doing is you saying that yoga was something different than the society. No, yoga was never something different from the society. Even today in our homes, even at this time, So when I'm eating my food in the evening, my mother tells me not to touch the phone and just concentrate on the food.
Yeah.
So we sit on the ground, on the floor, and eat the food, which means why do we sit on the floor? So that the earth elements, touches our body. We eat with our 5 fingers. Now, to somebody from Europe, it will be, they'll be very surprised. Why are they eating with their hands? Is it animalistic? No, not at all. It is because we believe in yoga that the 5 fingers represent the 5 elements. And when you eat with the 5 fingers, all your 5 elements in the body are balanced out. And therefore, we sit down on the ground and eat. So these small little things are
Yeah.
yoga in our family.
Yeah. It seems as
Getting
if
up at 4 in the morning, 3:34 in the morning, before sunrise, when the oxygen levels are very high, and that time is known in Sanskrit as Brahma Mahurat. So it is said that you are supposed to, a good yogi should get up at that time, because that time your capacity of working is very high. And getting up at that time is being a yogi. Not
yeah,
having
sure.
your bath just after your food is being a yogi. Having your bath before you're taking your food is being a yogi. Sleeping at the right time is being a yogi.
It has to do
So
with self-discipline. Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
Sure. So it seems as if these yogi techniques and this yogi philosophy has permeated Hindus' lives over the centuries. And this is very well reflected in their societies, in the way their society has developed, and also in their political regime of the time and the war attitudes against other nations. That's why they seem to be so peaceful as human beings. Now, we know that some yoga practices were later infused into Buddhism, but also that the Hindus have also accepted Buddha as an incarnation of their god Vishnu. Buddha was, of course, born in the 6th century, so he preceded sage Patanjali for over 3 centuries, at least 3 centuries. Um, so, to what degree does Buddha's yoga differ from Hindu's yoga, given the fact that there must have been a mutual respect between these two philosophical trends?
So now you need to first understand that Buddha was born in a Hindu family. Buddha was a Hindu. Buddha read the Hindu texts
Hmm.
when he grew up. Buddha read the Vedas. Buddha read the Karma Siddhanta, which means the doctrine of karma. So everything that Buddha studied was from the Hindu texts.
Mhm.
So even
Right.
his philosophy, had the imprints of the Hindu texts. You can clearly see that when he talks about Pratitya Samutapad, or the theory of dependent origination, when he talks about momentariness, which is mentioned in the Shvetasvatara Upanishad, when he talks about, Kshanikavad, which I just mentioned, momentariness, he is taking everything from the Vedas and Hinduism. Now, the
You're
question
right.
is, why did then he establish Buddhism? Why did he do that? Well, he did not establish any separate religion. He only said that, with time, every religion, develops certain things which are not, uh, which don't go well with the society. So these things, are developed over a period of times. And therefore, Buddha said that I just want a path which is not extremist. It should not be very rightist. It should not be very leftist. I want the middle path. And therefore, he never said that, I am a Buddhist. He never said that. The word Buddha is mentioned in the Rig Veda. The word Buddha means it is not meant for a person. Buddha is a state of being. Buddha means the
Right.
enlightened, the awakened, you know. So in the Atharva Ved, any rishi who is enlightened and awakened is known as Buddha. It is not Buddha, it is Buddha, but in English we say Buddha also. It is
Ah,
quite
yeah.
acceptable. Therefore, it is not the name of a person, it is a state of
Instead
being.
of being.
It is a state
Right.
of being. And so
Right.
Buddha never said that, I am a Buddhist. His marriage took place according to Hindu rites. And his, last rites were also according to Hindu rites. Therefore, but Buddha told his student, his follower, Anand, that, when I die after 500, years, there will be lot of changes in this path that I have developed. And that is what happened. Later on, people brought in a lot of things. So Buddhist meditation came in and Buddhist yoga came in. These are not separate. People have just started calling them by separate names. So you call water or you call H2O or you call pani or you call neer, give any name to water. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it quenches your thirst. And therefore, no matter which meditation technique you choose, no matter which yoga you follow, if it is leading you to peace, it is wonderful.
Right. So it stems from the same source.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and that's the most important thing that
And that's very important.
our audience has to remember.
Yes.
Great. Now, coming to some technical issues about the actual practice of yoga's philosophy today. How exactly is yoga understood by most of us?
I am not able to hear you.
Yeah.
How?
How is yoga understood by most people? What exactly shall a practitioner have to do to have access to some spiritual visions? I mean, what exactly do you meditate upon, and for what purpose? We know that some people say, some master teachers of yoga, that he will be a divine being when he will get the right to worship divinity. And we've got, we just have this question: when does the divine grace come, and human being is elevated to the level of a deity? I mean, that's a bit difficult for ordinary people to understand.
So first thing you said, how do people look at yoga today? So today, they don't look at yoga the way they should look at yoga. So I remember
Mm.
I had gone to Rome, Italy, and I came across posters, where they were talking about beer yoga and dog yoga and puppy yoga and partner yoga. So, yoga is now, it's a word which is attached to anything. It has become a word of marketing.
Yeah.
But that is not the right way of seeing things. Because yoga is definitely not all of this. And sadly, even in India, the younger generation, they are so influenced by the West. So if a yogi is teaching you yoga, they will not be very much interested. But if a foreigner is teaching yoga, then they are very much interested. So,
Mhm.
and in India, people are eating meat and they are practicing yoga. And a lot of other people do that. But they forget that the first principle of yoga is ahimsa. Ahimsa means non-violence in words, in actions, and in thoughts towards yourself and to all other beings. So until and unless you have not,
That's very difficult. That's
that's
the
very,
difficult part.
yes. So until and unless you have not cleared the
Yeah.
first, the foundation of yoga, you cannot go to the next level. So you have yam, niyam, asan, pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, dhyan, and samadhi is the last. So first you need to start with ahimsa. Ahimsa means no violence towards even the smallest of species in the cosmos. So you will often see when you come to India, um, You'll see a lot of people when they are walking in the rains, you have these insects who come out and they are crawling. They'll pick up the insect and they'll keep it on the side because this is what they have learned from their parents. Ahimsa towards the smallest of creatures in the cosmos.
So this tradition comes down from generation to generation, and it's thanks to that that
Thanks
somebody
to that. And
achieves, attains this
yes,
kind of virtue.
correct. And I was about
Yeah.
to mention that, so yoga also talks about ahimsa in thoughts. So yoga has this philosophy that, killing somebody is an action that you have done with your body. But before becoming an action, the moment you think that I want to kill this person, your karma is made.
Mm.
It is not supposed to be manifested on the body level.
Mm.
Already that violence is there inside you in your mind. And therefore, this violence will become your karma. And according to Ayurveda, which is also interlinked, it says that even if you have thought about killing somebody, harming somebody, it may not come out in your action, but one day it is going to come out as a disease in your body.
Yeah.
So the concept of karma, is also associated with ahimsa.
Um, I mean, that's it seems to have a long process,
Yes.
um, going from one stage to another one and then to another one until you get to the final stage. Um, and it must be quite a tiring one, a tiring journey, but it's worth trying. Um, what
No, not
about?
really. Not really. A lot of people, I have a lot of foreigners who tell me that, oh my God, your life is so difficult. How do you lead your life? And I say, for you it is difficult. For me, it's not difficult at all. I eat my dinner by 5:30. That's fine. I don't feel hungry at night. I get up in the morning by 4:30 maximum. And I do that every day. And that's how I am. That is the way of life. So I don't eat onions. I don't eat garlic. I don't wear silk because silk comes from a lot of ahimsa, a lot of cruelty. And so that I don't wear leather. So that is a way of life with me. And I've not even thought about it that, oh my God, my life is, not carrying on because I'm not wearing leather. So it is just not there in my mind. This is how my life is. I don't wear leather and it doesn't even bother me.
Um, so this is actually the definition of a way of life,
Yes.
um, a philosophy of life,
Compassionate living.
compassionate living. Um, right. Now, a few things about Kundalini power. It seems as if this kind of power is the sleeping giant, um, waiting to be awakened. How exactly, in a few words, can someone awaken this giant?
So, the first question that you asked me previously, about realization and how does divinity, where does divinity come? So, again, in yoga or in general Indian philosophy, we don't think that, divinity is somewhere else. Divinity is already within you. For example, if you're looking at the television and you're not able to clearly see the screen, you know, you just need to remove the dust and the screen is absolutely clear. That's all you need. And therefore, in Indian philosophy, avidya or ignorance is supposed to be the main cause of problem, of pain, of misery in the entire cosmos. Once ignorance goes away, you're already
Mm.
divine. Divinity is your nature, it is your dharma, it is your nature. Just as fire burns, you're already divine. Divinity is not going to come from somewhere. No, 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 no. You are divine already. Because the first verse of the Veda, Eko Aham Bahusyam, I am one, I become many. And therefore, divinity is already there. It is not going to come from somewhere. You are only supposed to realize the divinity.
So there has to be some self-acceptance of ignorance.
Yes,
Um, like the great master of Western philosophy and philosophy teacher Socrates once said, I know one thing that I don't know anything.
correct, correct.
So we have to be based on that kind of axiom.
Absolutely.
Um, it's great.
And
Um,
that is why, in India, Guru
yeah.
Shishya Parampara, Guru and Shishya, which means teacher and student, it's a very holy and divine relationship. So the student does not question the teacher because it is
Hmm.
taken for granted that the Guru is already enlightened. He has already been through all this. And
Yes.
therefore, when the Guru says anything to the Shishya accepts it because he knows that I'm going to be the next Guru.
Yeah. This is the right way that things are done. Um, Great. Now, regarding meditations, um, uh, we have this vague picture of meditating, but we don't actually know that there are several types of it. Uh, would you tell us the two or three basic kinds of meditations?
Yes, absolutely. So there are various ways of meditating. One meditating is, concentrating on your breath,
Mm.
just looking at your breath, not trying to breathe or, throughout your breath,
And close your
force.
eyes in the same time.
Close your eyes because, in
Yeah.
Bharat, it is said that when you have to search reality,
Mhm.
you have to look within because outer things are peripheral and momentary. So they
Yeah.
cannot be real. The reality lies within, and therefore, you need to close your eyes and you need to just concentrate on the breath. That is
As,
one way of
as if
meditation.
cutting off your senses from the external world, something like
Yes,
that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Just concentrating on your breath. That's it. So you will eventually realize, in fact, when I take meditation classes, I always tell my students, and they actually realize it practically that, as your breath will slow down, you will become calmer, your breath will become shorter. So there'll be a time you can also do that. You'll realize that your breath is just between your throat and your in the mid of your eyebrows, and then just here. So your breath will become very short as you will calm down. So initially you and the calmer you become, because when you start the process, you'll breathe from your abdomen, and later on you will just breathe from the tip of your nostrils to the mid of your eyebrows. So that is one way of meditating. The other is, concentrating on the ajna chakra. Ajna chakra is right between your eyebrows, and that is why
Really
Shiva, or
difficult.
Lord
That's really
Shiva, that
difficult.
you call in West, Lord Shiva has three eyes. That three eyes is symbolic of the fact that when you're not able to see
Mm.
this cosmos from these two eyes, you need to close your eyes and look from the eyes of wisdom.
Yeah, but
So,
that's not a human wisdom, but a kind of spiritual wisdom.
spiritual wisdom,
That, yeah,
absolutely. So,
yeah.
if you look at death from these two eyes, the only thing you can do is cry. But when you look at from the third eye of Shiva, you will see that death and birth are not two different things.
It's a
They are
cycle.
happening simultaneously. Even now, at this point, you have died. You know, a lot of you has already died. A lot of me has already died within. A lot of cells have died. I'm not the same person who came here 1 hour back. We are different people now. So, it is just that, we just look at death from a very gross point of view. But death is already, the cycle of death and birth is
Yeah,
taking
yeah.
place continuously in the cosmos, and that is what is known as the dance of Shiva. The dance of Shiva, death
Yes,
and
yes.
birth.
We're aware
So,
of it. Yeah, yeah. We're aware of it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So that is another way of concentrating. And then, there are other ways of concentrating also, like mantra chanting, chanting a certain mantra repeatedly. Now, these mantras are codifications of energy, so
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
guru gives you a certain mantra. So if you go to a guru, he will, gauge your aura, and according to your aura, he will give you a mantra. He won't give you any mantra. Maybe he will not give you Om Namah Shivaya, he will give you some other mantra, because he'll say, no, right now you are not prepared to chant Om Namah Shivaya.
So
So,
he knows
he,
your state of being at that time.
yeah, Guru knows very well. So they can predict. I know a lot of people in India who can actually predict what is coming. So,
Unbelievable.
so now I don't know how can they predict, but they do
Yeah.
predict. So
Yeah.
they know very well. They look at you. They'll give you a very simple mantra which does not, because I've in my life seen that mantras affect you a lot.
Because
If
they say
somebody a
you're not
very
ready
heavy
yet.
mantra,
This
yes,
thing. Yeah.
and your energies are not able to, imbibe the mantra,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
will fall sick, or there will be mishappenings in your life. And therefore, the guru gives you the mantra which is right for you at that particular time. And then as you grow spiritually, he'll give you other mantras also. But Bij mantra remains same, which means that one mantra which is given to you at the time of Diksha, that will
Yeah. Yeah.
remain with you till you die.
Wise move. A wise move on part of the gurus. Um, Now, two closing questions about the present, our present, and how can human beings control their impulses and animal instincts by their intelligent brain? Because it's more often than not that human beings are carried away by their emotions, by their instincts. They do irrational stuff. Sometimes they don't even get punished. Um, but the thing is, how exactly yoga um, helps? How can yoga help them to become more controlled person, more controlled as human beings?
See, when you say animal instinct, that's a huge abuse to animals. Animals don't create chaos. They don't. It is humans who are creating chaos. Animals don't get into wars. It is humans that are getting into wars. Animals don't rape. Humans rape. You see? So humans are evil, not animals. Animals are very dharmic. They are following nature. They are following the cosmic order. And therefore, animalistic instinct is a wrong word. They are evil humans. So, how yoga can help them? Well, firstly, they need to realize that what they are doing is wrong. They need to surrender to yoga. And then the first principle, as I said, ahimsa,
Yes, yes.
non-violence in words, in thoughts, and in action. It will take a very long time to submit to the concept of ahimsa only. If you can, be rooted in ahimsa, half of your battle is won in this cosmos.
Mhm. Great,
Half of the battle is won. So I
great.
think ahimsa, and the next principle of yoga is ahimsa, satya. Sorry, yam. The first is yam. In yam, the first is ahimsa. So ahimsa is very important. And then you have satya. Satya means being in yam. Yam is the first principle of yoga. In yam, there are 5 principles that you have to follow. What are the 5 principles? Ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, and aparigraha. So I recommend everybody to just follow yam, which means non-violence. Satya is honesty. Honesty in thoughts, words, and actions. Ahimsa, satya, asteya. Asteya means not trying to, like, let's say you have written a book and I try to
Mhm.
say, no, this thought is mine. So what you are trying to do, this is theft. So non-theft in words, actions, and thoughts. And then aparigraha, collecting more than what you need. Therefore, don't collect thoughts, don't collect emotions, don't collect too many things. Now we have people who collect so many shoes, but they won't wear, half of the shoes throughout the year, and then they will throw it away. People are collecting clothes. People are collecting emotions. Oh, he said this to me last year. That is why I will not talk to him.
Yeah.
Collection of emotions will lead you to misery. They will become a cause of blood pressure. They will become a cause of diabetes. They will become a cause of some other disease. And then
Yeah.
last is brahmacharya. Brahmacharya means being rooted in celibacy. Celibacy means other than your wife, if you are married, if you are not, then it's a different thing. Other than your wife, all other women in the society are your daughters and sisters. But today, what we are seeing is that human being has come down to the level that they are raping animals also. So these are the 5 things. The first principle of yoga, which is yam, which is ahimsa, satya, astei, aparigraha, and brahmacharya, which everybody should follow. And if they are able to have command on these, I think half of the problems of the world will be sorted. If they're able to have command on this, then they can go to the next, which is niyam, yam, niyam, asan, pranayam, pratyahar, dharan, dhyan, and samadhi. So yes.
It's a state of mind, as it seems to me. It's due to the inability of human beings to distinguish between the reality and the imagination. I mean, they seem to be living in their own imaginary world, not realizing what reality actually is. And the
Absolutely.
reality is far beyond on what they themselves tend to think of. I mean, they've got to get out of their matrix and see reality and get some real help from support from gurus or people that are interested in helping them.
Yes, Sanskrit, this is known as Vivek, development of Vivek. Vivek is the ability to see between what is real and what is unreal. So it is
Sure.
highly advised for a person on the path of realizing the self that he should develop Vivek, and understand what is real and what is unreal. You need to understand that all the relationships that you have with you, your mother, your father, your wife, your brother, your child, they are all momentary. They are not real. At the end, it is you who is real.
Mhm.
Not even you, yourself, the Atma. That is the only thing that is real. But what we do is we get so entangled with these relationships that we end up getting into suicide or depression because of these momentary peripheral relationships.
Yeah, it also reminds me of the phrase of the great Greek philosophers, know the self.
Know the self. Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes,
it all
absolutely.
starts from there. Uh,
Absolutely.
and
Yes.
one last question. Last question. Today, there are some modern philosophical trends that, like CBT, cognitive behavioral treatment, that seem to treat the symptoms rather than the cause. On the other hand, we have elaborated on yoga techniques as techniques which actually um, come to the root of the problem. Now, our question is, can these two philosophies get together so as to have a more powerful weapon to help human beings overcome their obstacles in their lives? Is it
Yes, in
possible?
fact, yeah. In fact, in
Can this
India,
be done? Yeah,
there are a lot of doctors, allopathy doctors in India. Well, there are a lot of allopathy doctors who don't believe in something like yoga or Ayurveda or homeopathy, so on and so forth. But then I've seen doctors in India who give medicines, allopathy medicines, to treat immediate symptoms if a person is
Mm.
suffering from them. But for the long run, they will always advise him to go for yoga and Ayurveda. Because the aim of a doctor should not be to prove that my pathy is better than your pathy. The aim of the doctor should be to heal the patient. But unfortunately, today a lot of doctors don't want the patient to heal because they want the patient to come back again and
Mm.
again. Because every patient that heals is, a loss in your profits.
Yeah.
So, well, we have that kind of a thinking, then things will be tough. Otherwise, I think science and spirituality can come together in order to heal the world.
A very helpful message. Very helpful message on the part of Dr. Vandana Sharma. Um, Dr. Sharma, I would like to thank you again for being with us. And we had the opportunity to listen to you carefully, explaining us what exactly yoga technique is and how does yoga help human beings to not only heal themselves, but understand their own existence, because yoga is not only experimental, but also existential, um, as we have learned so far. So, thank you very much again for being with us
Thank you so
today.
much.
And I hope to have another live session on another interesting issue um, that you might want to explain to us.
Sure, I think we will have a nice session on astrology someday, the philosophy of astrology,
That's great.
prediction of future. Yes,
That would be great.
yes,
So thank you very much.
very well. Thank you so much.
Have a good night.
You too.